I'm just waiting for the recording to start. Okay, only 2 students in the class, but I will carry on nevertheless. I am recording, so I will share the recording on YouTube like I normally do. Quiz 2 will take place on Sunday. The majority of the class have requested that I move it to Sunday due to there being some other assessments on Saturday. So it will take place on Sunday morning. I haven't changed the date yet, but I will do so shortly. So on Tuesday, we looked at registering authorities, the registration and licensing of motor vehicles, as well as driver's licenses and learner's licenses. Then there was a question which I couldn't quite fully understand what the student was asking about. The student isn't currently in class, but it was something about where does he get a driehoek? I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure what he was referring to. Was he referring to the public driver's permit that the driver of a taxi needs, or is he talking about his taxi license? Either which way, this connects to what we are doing today, the first part of the lecture, namely operators, section 60 to 64 of the Road Traffic and Transportation Act. Let me just share my slides. So while the slides are uploading, first thing that I must drill into your brains, which is very important, is that you must distinguish between a driver and an operator. The driver of a vehicle and the operator of a vehicle is not always the same person. In certain instances, it can be the same person, but it isn't always the same person. Sometimes a vehicle can have an operator and a different person who is the driver. Thumbs up quickly if you can see the slides. Okay, there's one student that can see the slides. Okay, so we're looking at operators, your learning objectives. In order to fully comprehend and understand the section of the work, you need to read sections 60 to 67 of the Road Traffic and Transportation Act. Remember, I have pointed this out to you that the notes, the study notes that are on e-learning are not sufficient. There are certain aspects where I refer to the actual legislation. And you have to have recourse, you have to read the actual legislation. So what am I talking about? Let's start off with a question then. Who is the operator? Who is the operator of a vehicle? Well, section one of the RTTA, section 1, you will recall, is the section that has the definitions. Section 1 defines an operator as the person responsible for the use of a motor vehicle. Person responsible for the use of a motor vehicle of any class contemplated in Chapter 6 and who is registered as the operator of such vehicle. Doesn't give us all that much information. It refers us then to Chapter 6. So if we go to Chapter 6, Section 60, subsection 1 states that no person shall operate on a public road any motor vehicle of a class prescribed for the purposes of this part unless the person is registered as the operator of such motor vehicle in accordance with the provisions of this section. So together, that hasn't quite told us what an operator is yet, but it gives us some clues. It refers to motor vehicles of a particular class and that there is registration required. Now, to find out the details of that class, we need to go to the regulations. The regulations tell us what is meant by a motor vehicle of a class prescribed. Regulation 284, don't need to remember the number of the regulation, refers to the prescribed classes of instances where an operator must register. Regulation 284 states that an operator must be identified and registered in respect of a goods vehicle with a gross vehicle mass exceeding 3,500 kilograms, a breakdown vehicle, a bus, a minibus with a gross vehicle mass exceeding 3,500 kilograms, or which is irrespective of its GVM, designed or adapted to convey 12 or more persons, including the driver. Any motor vehicle used to convey persons for reward, so a taxi, and then any motor vehicle contemplated in Part 4 of this chapter. Part 4 of the chapter refers to dangerous goods, so any motor vehicle used for the transportation of dangerous goods. So for any of those vehicles, in addition to the registration and licensing of the vehicle, the operator of the vehicle must register, irrespective of whether this vehicle is used for reward or not. For used for reward, that means if somebody else pays you to be transported, or if you are somebody is paying you to transport their goods. But even if you have a business and this business has a truck that is bigger than 3,500 GVM, but you're using it purely for your own business, not to transport your own workers, for example, but people aren't paying you, so you're not using it for reward, it must still be registered. The operator must still register. So now we still need to narrow it down. We now know which classes of motor vehicles we're referring to, but we still need to narrow it down. All we know so far is there's these certain categories of motor vehicles where an operator must register. But still trying to figure out exactly who is this person, who is the operator, who must register. So the Act was a bit circular in this regard. It says that the operator is the person who is registered as such. Subsection 2 of Section 60, however, says that the operator is the owner. The owner of the motor vehicle will usually, so not always, but the owner of a motor vehicle of the prescribed class will usually be regarded as the operator and has duty to register as such. Usually the owner, exceptions to this is people that's not on the slide, but instances where people have entered into long-term lease agreements for a period of longer than 3 months for this vehicle. Then the person who is renting the vehicle must register as operator. The operator, this person that is registered, this is important, is the person who is responsible for the use of the motor vehicle. So this is not necessarily the driver. Let me give an example of this. Let's say Leslie Ann owns a vehicle that she uses as a taxi. But Michael drives for her. She doesn't drive the car herself. Michael does the driving, but Leslie Ann owns the vehicle. Leslie Ann will register as the operator. Michael is the driver. He needs the appropriate public driver's permit to be able to be allowed to transport passengers for reward. But the operator, Leslie Ann, registers as operator. If, however, Michael owns the vehicle that he uses as a taxi, Michael will register both as operator and be the driver. So sometimes the driver and the operator are the same person, but in many instances, they are not. If it is a business that uses a truck, that owns a truck, let's use NUST. NUST owns buses. NUST is the operator of these buses. But there are various bus drivers in the employ of NUST that drive the buses. So the business is the operator, and the driver is the chappie or the lady that physically sits behind the steering wheel. When you register, you're issued with an operator's card. There's a picture of one, looks similar to a license disc. If you see these heavy vehicles, walk closer, have a look at the front window. It must be displayed on the left-hand side of the windshield of the vehicle, so just above or just below the license disc. There are 3 categories of operators' cards: for goods vehicles, passenger vehicles, and dangerous goods vehicles, marked with the letters G, P, and D, respectively. Now, why is it important for us to establish the identity of the operator? Why is it important to know who the operator is? 2 reasons. Firstly, Section 64 details the duties of the operator. Section 64 of the Act imposes certain duties on the operator of a vehicle. Obviously, if you have a duty and you don't comply with that duty, you can get into trouble. So operators have these duties. If these duties are not complied with, the state needs to know who to prosecute, who to charge with not obeying the law. So that is why, because it's easy to establish the identity of the driver, because the driver is the person physically sitting behind the steering wheel. But because the operator and the driver is not always the same person, it's always important to ensure that the duties are complied with, that you be able to establish who this driver is, who the operator is. You can establish who the operator is by checking the records of Natus, who is registered as the operator, then there's also the presumption that the operator is the owner, and it's always easy to establish the owner of the vehicle. In addition to this, so in addition to their own duties, Section 67, subsection 1, don't need to remember the subsections, also provide that operators are vicariously liable for acts or omissions of their employees. Now, the term vicariously liable is a common legal term which provides that in some instances in our law, the employer can be held liable for the wrongdoing of the employee. So not only do operators have their own duties, but there are also instances where if their employee, so if the driver breaks the law, that the operator can also be charged. Explanation there, what is vicarious liability? Situation where somebody, an employer, is held liable for the actions or omissions of another person, the employee, provided these acts were performed in the course and scope of their duty as employee. Road Traffic and Transportation Act in section 67 doesn't provide for blanket vicarious liability, so it's not all instances where the operator will be held liable for transgressions committed by the driver. In terms of section 67, vicarious liability is limited to where the operator connived with, worked together with, schemed with, or knowingly permitted the act or omission, or where the operator was negligent. But in those three instances, so if they schemed together, connived with, if the operator knowingly had full knowledge and allowed this, or where he was negligent, the operator can be held liable together with the driver. So back to the question. Now we know why it's important. Why must we know who the operator is? Because of their duties, because of vicarious liability. How do we establish the identity of the operator? The owner is regarded as the operator, but there's a further presumption that in the event of court proceedings, the name that appears on the operator's card is deemed to be correct, and that person was the operator at the time the offense was committed. So if there was an offense and your name is in the operator's card, all the prosecution has to do to prove that you were the operator is submit to court a copy of the operator's card. And it is deemed that if your name is on there, you are guilty. If at that stage you were actually not the operator and you had neglected to change it or whatever, it will be up to you to prove your innocence. Okay, and then the duties of the operator, those appear in section 64. You need to study the duties of the operator. I am not going to teach them to you, but I will ask them in your exam for you to discuss certain duties of the operator. When you discuss the duty of the operator, your discussion must at all times include two aspects, namely, what is the duty? And secondly, why in your mind do you think the law imposes this duty on the operator? Don't memorize, use your own words. So what you need to do in preparation for questions based on this is take the act and rewrite those duties in your own words. Let's try. I'm just going to stop sharing because this is the last slide so that I can have the class in front of me. Let's try an example here. Section 64B. Now listen carefully, please. Section 64B states that the operator must ensure that such motor vehicle complies with such requirements regarding equipment as may be prescribed and with the fitness requirements contemplated in Chapter 5. What do you think that means in ordinary English?
Can you please repeat that again, ma'am?
Sorry, Ms. Martins?
Could you please just repeat the sentence that you just gave us?
What I'm going to do, I'm busy sharing a blank page here. Just give me a second. Then I'm going to type it out for you quickly.
Okay.
I'm going to shorten it slightly, leave part of it out, just to make it faster. Complies with the fitness Okay, can you all see that screen where I typed that sentence out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now in your own words, explain to me, that is one of the duties of an operator. In your own words, try to explain to me, what does that mean? What is the duty of the operator?
Can I go ahead?
Yes, Ms. Martins, by all means.
Okay. I would say it is the duty of an operator to ensure that a motor vehicle is roadworthy as prescribed in Chapter 5.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And if you're in an exam and you can't remember the Chapter 5, but that's 100% okay. The important bit is the operator must ensure that the motor vehicle is roadworthy. So that is the what part. What is the duty? But to complete your discussion for maximum marks, you need to tell me why. And that bit is not in the act. That bit, the why part, isn't in the act. That why part is in your head, in your brain. Why does the operator have this duty?
It's for the safety purpose.
100%, Mr. Matileni, 100%. So the why bit is for safety purposes. As easy as that, as absolutely easy as that. So In order to prepare for a question on the duties of the operator, I normally ask you to discuss 5 duties of the operator for 10 marks. So in order to prepare for a question like that, what you need to do, so this is not for the quiz. The quiz is multiple choice. Quiz, you don't have to type any answers. But for your face-to-face assessments, what you need to do is go through section 60. Go through section 60, put them in your own words, like Miss Martins illustrated by putting it in her own words. And for each one of them, ask yourself, why does the operator have this duty? For safety purposes, to protect the passenger, whatever your words are. There's no absolutely this is correct or answer type of thing that you have. Absolute common sense. The majority of these duties are geared at safety. So if you're discussing 5 duties and you find yourselves giving the same answer to the why for 4 of the 5 or 3 of the 5, that's okay. You don't have to think of different words every time. Most of them are for safety purposes. So absolutely, 100% there. Okay, moving on then to the second part. Okay, first of all, any questions about operators? No questions. Okay, the second part of the study unit concerns cross-border transport. I'm just uploading my second set of slides. Okay, just a thumbs up quickly. Can you see those slides? Okay, so cross-border transport. This is the second part of that particular chapter of the Road Traffic and Transportation Act, section 68 to 71. So there's not a lot there. It's once again very straightforward, lots of common sense. You need to read the relevant sections of the Act for yourself. This particular part of the Road Traffic and Transportation Act actually has its own definitions. And an important definition that you need to know is the term cabotage. Cabotage, a term which is pretty much unique to road transportation. It's not a word that you're going to be using when you're conversing with your friends, but it's important that you understand what cabotage is. Cabotage in the first instance applies only to vehicles that are not registered in Namibia. So foreign vehicles. The term cabotage is used to refer to instances where a foreign vehicle, a vehicle not registered in Namibia, is used for loading freight or passengers at a point in Namibia for offloading at any other point in Namibia. So a South African registered tour bus comes to Namibia, loads tourists in Windhoek and takes them to Swakopmund. That would be cabotage. Or furthermore, when a vehicle that is not registered in Namibia is used for the loading of freight or passengers in Namibia to be transported to a country that is not the state of registration of the vehicle used for such transport. So a South African vehicle comes, loads passengers in Windhoek and takes them to Botswana. That is cabotage. Foreign vehicle coming to Namibia, loading passengers and transporting them in Namibia, or loading something for passengers or freight in Namibia, taking them to a country which is not the country of origin of this vehicle. Further definitions, these are straightforward. A cross-border transport agreement. We've come across cross-border transport agreements previously when we were doing the SADC protocol. In the SADC protocol, it spoke about that member states must enter into cross-border transport agreements. In fact, when we were looking at treaties, we looked at some examples, looked at the cross-border transport agreement between Namibia and Zimbabwe. So now all these play pieces are coming together. Road Traffic and Transportation Act also refers to cross-border transport agreements. It is simply an agreement between Namibia and any other country whereby arrangements are made for the control and regulation of road transport between Namibia and such countries. So it's literally what the name says, an agreement regulating cross-border transport. Foreign carrier who undertakes road transport with a vehicle which is not registered in Namibia. Road transport, for the purpose of this section, transport of passengers or freight by road for reward in the course of business of the carrier or by means of a hired vehicle. So it does not include holiday makers coming with their own cars. There is road transport for the purposes of this section of the Act. We're talking about for business purposes, transportation for reward or in the course of the business. Now, essentially what the law says is that if you are in the business of transporting freight or passengers from Namibia into Namibia or through Namibia, you must have a cross-border permit. So all of this is a lot of background leading to the essential statement that the law says you must have a cross-border permit if you are transporting freight or passengers from Namibia into Namibia or through Namibia. These cross-border permits are issued by the Roads Authority, valid for a period of 3 months at a time. But the purpose of these cross-border transport agreements is to make the issue, the application and issue of cross-border permits easier for the people that need them. Essentially, there's just some example of some of the existing agreements that we have. The advantage for people requiring these cross-border permits is that they provide that foreign carriers can apply for cross-border permits in their country of origin, and Namibian carriers can apply locally. So if Philippus is in the business of, he's got a trucking company and he wants to transport freight to South Africa, he will need a cross-border permit to enter into South Africa, but he can apply for that cross-border permit in Windhoek. Similarly, if Michael is a South African tour operator and he wishes to bring a group of tourists into Namibia, he can apply for his cross-border permit in South Africa. So it just makes the whole business a whole lot easier. Foreign carriers can apply for these permits in their country of origin. Namibian carriers can apply for these permits in Namibia. Except in instances where we are talking about cabotage. That didn't work. Let's erase that. Let's try that pen. Cross-border permits for cabotage can only be obtained in Windhoek, in Namibia. Let's go back, remind ourselves, what is cabotage? That is when a foreign licensed vehicle wants to come to Namibia. So this is not Michael bringing South Africans from South Africa. This is Michael, a South African, coming to Namibia to upload passengers in Windhoek to take them to Swakop or to Botswana. For the purposes of cabotage, the relevant permits can only be obtained in Namibia. So if Michael wants to do this, he will have to travel to Namibia before that to come and apply for the necessary permit, or get an agent or somebody here to do it on his behalf. So it makes it a lot more complicated. That's my last slide. But I want you to quickly, this is a distinction level question. But Lesley-Ann, you seem very sharp and awake this morning. Not that you always are, but particularly this morning. Why do you think that for cabotage, cross-border permits are only, sorry, can only be obtained in, sorry, I've got the sneezes now. Why do you think that in the case of cabotage, you have to apply for these cross-border? Why are they making it more difficult to get cross-border permits for cabotage? It's a common sense question. It's not a law question.
I would say basically for control purposes, because if a Namibian vehicle that is registered, our systems are not integrated yet. So I would think that Namibian vehicles Namibians should be able to get cross-border permits in their country of issue to use in other countries. But for control mechanisms, it would be easier for Namibia to keep track of what's happening if they're registered here and not elsewhere.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct, definitely for control purposes. But there's another reason why our law is in fact making it more difficult for foreign carriers to come to Namibia and load freight and transport freight here or load passengers here. Remember, we're not talking about a South African company bringing South Africans here. We're talking about a South African company coming here and transporting Namibians. Why are we making it more difficult for them? Control, yes, but there's another reason.
Is it not tourism purposes?
It is linked to tourism, but what is the underlying reason why we are making this more difficult for foreigners?
Isn't it to better advantage our the service providers in the country that also provide the same service? Because if we're going to allow other people to come and provide, we're basically they're making a profit out of it, and it's disadvantaging our operators in the country.
Absolutely, Ms. Martins, 100%. An absolute common sense approach. It's about dollars and cents. Now this chap comes from South Africa and loads Namibian passengers that are paying the South African who's taking that money out of the country. We're not saying they may not do it. We're just making it slightly more difficult for them to rather advantage our Namibian operators to make it easier for Namibians to do business in Namibia. And other countries have similar arrangements. If a Namibian wants to go to South Africa to collect tourists in South Africa and take them to Botswana, it's similarly cabotage, and they have to get their cross-border permit in Cape Town. So it's not just Namibia, it's all the countries that have agreed that this is how we're going to do it, to protect their own local people. So to protect our own carriers, our own operators that can do the same job and keep the money that these people are paying in the country. 100% insight there. Thank you so much, Ms. Martins. Okay, any further questions? Okay, well, Winbard said here to avoid transport industry congestion. That is also for control to avoid congestion, etc., etc. 100% also a reason. There are lots of reasons, but I was looking specifically for the reason. And all of those, if I'd asked a question like that in an assessment, I would award marks. So, Mr. Winbard, your answer is also correct. But I was looking to provoke just a little bit of discussion about the economic reasons underlying these legislative provisions. Okay, further questions?
Now, Miss.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay. Okay.
So
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Johannes.
Do Namibians law allow foreigners to come drive here for rewards now? For example, Zimbabweans, they are here driving taxi, and then they are getting reward after transporting customers. Is it allowed to the law of Namibia?
You know, a taxi driver, I'm actually going to give you a straight out no. I want to qualify the no, but it's a bigger no than yes. Making money, for a foreigner to be employed or to make money in Namibia, you need, if you're not a Namibian citizen, you need a work permit. So if a Zimbabwean comes and wants to become a taxi driver here, he needs a work permit. And work permits, that's not transportation law, that is the Immigration Control Act. You apply for your work permit through the Ministry of Home Affairs. And I doubt it very much, because one of the requirements Home Affairs is very strict about the issue of work permits. Even highly qualified people that want to become a lecturer at NUST sometimes struggle to get a work permit, because the Ministry of Home Affairs attitude is, if there are suitable Namibians, if there's a Namibian that can do the job, we're not going to give a permit to a South African or a Zimbabwean or whatever. So I will 100% tell you that if somebody that wants to come and drive a taxi applies for a work permit, the Ministry of Home Affairs is going to say no. There are enough Namibians that can drive taxis. We don't need a Zimbabwean to drive taxis. Bottom line, unfortunately, is that many of them do it in any event, and hope they don't get caught. But legally, no, they won't get the necessary permits for that.
Okay, Miss.
Okay, thank you so much. Test then on Sunday morning. If there is anybody that has a religious, as I stated on the group. If there's anybody that has religious objections to writing on Saturday morning, the same procedures will apply for that I follow with the Seventh-day Adventist students. Contact me, send me proof of your religious affiliation, and I will make alternative arrangements for you. Okay, thank you so much. Good luck with your preparation then for the quiz. Bye.